With Labor Day weekend comes the start of the final countdown to Election Day. Joining us now, Symone Sanders, Senior Advisor for the Biden campaign. Hey, Symone, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brett.
The Treasury Secretary just paints a pretty optimistic view of where the U.S. economy is going to be come Election Day. Is that a problem for your campaign?
Well, Brett, I did hear the Treasury Secretary just a moment ago, and I think folks have to ask themselves at home, is this recovery working for you? Now, economists are starting to call this recovery a K-shaped recovery, meaning it is going well and going up for folks at the top, but for folks who are middle class or below, it's going down. And so the question really is this working for working families? And the answer is no. Look, 1 in 6 small businesses have shuttered their doors. If you work more than 24 million people have noted that they are teleworking. And so if you work a job that has you working on a laptop and you can work at a desk, you're less at risk for COVID. But I'm thinking, Brett, and Joe Biden is thinking about the folks who are truck drivers and who work as cashiers and who are working in the grocery stores, auto workers. Those are folks that are at higher risk of shortened hours, but also higher risk of being exposed to COVID. So I just really think we have to think about the pain that working families across this country are experiencing right now.
What about the prospects for a vaccine before Election Day? Asked about the safety of that, Dr. Anthony Fauci said this.
I think that we can have some confidence and have faith in what the FDA is saying. They're saying very explicitly that they're going to be making the decision based on the scientific data, and we hope that that's going to be the case.
Is the Biden campaign saying essentially if a vaccine comes out before Election Day, it shouldn't be trusted, or that it's pure politics? A couple of times the former vice president has weighed in on that.
Well, Brett, I think what we're saying is, first and foremost, we all want a vaccine, right? But we want that vaccine to be safe. And when a vaccine is eventually available, we want it to be equitably distributed. And the question really is how can Americans and folks across the country trust the president to be able to effectively and equitably distribute a vaccine when he's had issues getting personal protective equipment to frontline workers all across this country? And so we all want a vaccine, Brett. But we want it to be safe, and we want it to get to folks across this country in every community that needs it.
So if it comes out the last week in October and the FDA gives it the go-ahead, you're okay with that?
Well, Brett, again, we all want a vaccine. The question is, how will it be distributed? Well, working families across this country, I just talked about the folks who work at cashier, who are working check cashing counters and work in grocery stores, and folks who are truck drivers. Will they have the ability to get this vaccine? We know that African American and Latino folks in this country are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Will those neighborhoods and communities across the country have the opportunity to receive the vaccine? That is the question. And if we look at just frankly how this White House and how the administration has handled the mitigation or the lack thereof of COVID-19, has handled, distributing personal protective equipment to folks across this country, there have been real issues. So we would hope that if a vaccine is available, that it is safe, but it's a question of, can the Trump administration distribute it equitably? And,
okay. And they say they have a plan for that.
We don't know.
But will Joe Biden get the vaccine if it's available?
Well, look, Brett, again, as I just noted, first and foremost, I think folks have asked, we've had lots of conversations about testing, right? And as folks know now, Vice President Biden and Senator Harris are being regularly tested, as are our campaign staff. But first and foremost, at the top of mind for Vice President Biden are the American people getting what they need. The White House has testing, Brett. Folks are tested very regularly coming in and out of the White House, anyone who's around the president. But that testing, that level of testing is not available to folks across this country. So if a vaccine were to become available, again, it's about, will working families benefit? Will they be able to receive the vaccine?
Okay. Many journalists detected a shift in the former vice president's answer about shutting down the economy. Take a listen.
Get off Twitter and start talking to the congressional leaders in both parties. Invite them to the Oval Office. The Oval Office. Negotiate a deal. A deal for somebody other than yourself.
So if the scientists say shut it down?
I would shut it down. I would listen to the scientists. There is going to be no need, in my view, to be able to shut down the whole economy. I got asked by David Muir a question. If I was asked to shut everything down, I took that as a generic question. Am I going to follow the science?
So would he shut it down or not?
Well, I think the vice president was very clear in that last clip, Brett. He noted that he was asked by David Muir, and he took it very generic, that if it was recommended by the scientists that that is what needed to happen to keep Americans safe, would he do it? And the answer was yes. But look, the reality is this, that Vice President Biden wants folks to be able to go to work. Just like I noted, we want folks to be able to get that vaccine. We want working families we want folks to be able to send their children to school safely. And currently, in Donald Trump's America, that's not happening. And so I think in the beginning of that clip, what you heard was Vice President Biden urging President Trump to call the Democratic leaders in the United States Congress, in the Senate and in the House, bring them to the White House. Let's negotiate a deal, get this done for the American people.
But it goes the other way, Symone, too. He is now the de facto head of the Democratic Party. Why doesn't Joe Biden call Nancy Pelosi and say, let's get a deal done?
Well, I do believe, Brett, that Speaker Pelosi passed a stimulus bill in the House more than 115 days ago.
Right, but there's a big difference. There's a gap between what they're talking about as far as the negotiation.
Well, right, Brett, and so I don't think I've read anywhere where Speaker Pelosi or Leader Schumer have noted that they're unwilling to work with the president. I think even you have noted that the president has to come to the table and negotiate. And so what Vice President Biden is urging, and I think what the American people want, is a deal. You know, Donald Trump talks about being this business leader that can cut great deals. Make a deal with Congress. Come on, do your job. This is part of the job as president.
Let's talk about the protests and the violence around the country, often turning into riots and looting, some significant violence stemming from it. This week, the former vice president has condemned that rioting and looting and violence, spoke out about it, but he has yet to condemn Antifa, a group that is behind a lot of the violence. Specifically, why?
Brett, the vice president has been very clear. He condemns all forms of violence. And frankly, what you heard him say in the speech that he gave on Monday of last week was, it doesn't matter what political party you belong to. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. Violence is wrong. And in this moment, he is calling for calm. And he has also noted throughout the week, Brett, that he, asked the president to join him in condemning violence regardless of who is causing it. So Joe Biden has been very clear. I do believe it's Donald Trump that has not.
Do the dozen-plus Biden campaign staffers who donated to this Minnesota Freedom Fund have any regrets about that, now that at least one person bailed out has been rearrested on a serious charge?
Brett, it was not and has not been our campaign position of bailing anyone out. So I'm unsure about specifically what you're speaking to.
Well, Kamala Harris tweeted about it. She said if you're able to chip into the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota, please do.
So, Brett, look, I think you asked a good question, right? Do we condemn the violence? And the answer is yes. Now, protesting, we have to make a clear distinction between protesting and violence. To be clear, as Vice President Biden has said, though, burning communities, looting communities is not protesting. That's violence. And we condemn that in all forms. But protesting peacefully is necessary. It's American, and folks should be raising their voices in this moment.
Why do you think all these police organizations have endorsed President Trump?
I'm unsure, Brett. I'm not in the negotiations, if you will, inside these various police organizations. But what I can tell you is more than 132 law enforcement officers from across this country in high-ranking positions, former folks, endorsed Vice President Biden on Friday. And I can also tell you this, that when you ask the American people looking at these polls, who do voters trust to keep them safe in this country? Overwhelmingly, they say Joe Biden. And so I think, this law and order campaign, if you will, that President Trump and his campaign are trying to gin up and run, I don't think it's working, because the question is, are you safe in Donald Trump's America? Are you safe from COVID? Are you safe from the incitement of violence?
Okay.
Is it safe to send your children to school? And unequivocally, the answer is no.
Let me end on this. Here is New York Governor Andrew Cuomo this week.
Changed his residence to go to Florida. Why? He can't come back to New York. He can't. He's going to walk down the street in New York. Forget bodyguards. He better have an army if he thinks he's going to walk down the street in New York.
And you talk about speaking out against violence. Was that appropriate or helpful for your campaign?
Well, Brett, Governor Cuomo doesn't work for the Biden campaign. I'm not sure in what context he was speaking, but I can tell you what Joe Biden. I can tell you what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris believe. They believe that we should live in a country where the president does not incite violence or fan the flames of hate in this country, pour gasoline on tense situations. They believe that we need leadership who's ready to stand up for all of the folks, not just people who voted for the president. And that is the kind of leader that Joe Biden will will be a president for all Americans.
So they would condemn that language from Governor Cuomo.
I don't know what context Governor Cuomo was speaking which, but I can tell you, and I don't speak for Governor Cuomo. I speak for Joe Biden and Senator Harris, and what I can tell you is what they believe.
Symone, we really appreciate your time. Happy Labor Day.
Thank you. Happy Labor Day.